How's it going?
Going good. How are you?
Good. We can hear each other. Sounds good.
Yeah, that's a very good thing.
That's a good day, Mavo.
Oh yeah, I will say I'm very excited for today. Um, I I know that you and me agree on a whole heck of a lot. I don't know if this is one of the places where we'll disagree.
Honestly, I think police reform is really complicated in the way that it takes place and what everything it means. So I think there's a lot more to it than just like a lot of like being like political stuff. Like whether or not I believe in capitalism versus communism and stuff like that. It's way different because it's much more complex and careful about. You have to decide which way a person should be trained when they go out and protect the country. So.
Yeah, that's true. I don't
It's a
know.
pretty serious effect.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. This is the Wake Up America podcast. We're a conservative talk show, and we absolutely love comments. Please leave as many comments as you want. The only thing that we ask for those comments is that you keep them clean and you keep them relevant to our show today. We really appreciate when you guys limit your cussing, so that way more people are willing and wanting to listen to what we're talking about with you. So
Yeah,
feel free to
absolutely.
add comments. And the topic for today's show is continuing our topics for last week, which started off with the BLM movement. And now we're moving on to the idea of police reform and whether that's a good thing, a bad thing, whether some police reform is required, whether a complete overhaul of the system is required. And so we're just going to be talking about that today. Today is a bit more of a looser format. We're not going to be citing as many facts, and we're kind of hoping that you guys will be able to pipe in your opinions because, like Coleson was just talking about, this is a pretty nuanced issue, especially in terms of what people think needs to be done. So please feel free to add your comments.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is like saying this is like the public taking control of, say, for instance, like the military's training, right? We obviously aren't in the military, so we don't know everything. But we can see with police what is bad, what can we do better, and these are things that directly impact the general population of the entire country. So, I mean, things like with George Floyd, is it okay that in the police manuals they teach the part of the training is that they teach that if you need to restrain a person, one of the steps you can do that is to kneel on the back of their neck. Is that okay? Is that not okay? That's something that's people have different opinions on. There are people who can say that's absolutely not okay, and there's some people who can say that doesn't really matter. Um, but then obviously, I think we can all agree that in the instance of George Floyd kneeling on that officer kneeling on his neck for 8 minutes is completely unacceptable. I mean, that takes it to a whole different level.
Yeah, and I figured that that's kind of where we'd start off today because that's part of the discussion is how that officer treated that situation. And in my mind, the training that he received was not the proper training. There are many other ways to restrain someone or to hold someone down, even to the ground. And there are many more ways that are not only better, but they're also more effective. Kneeling on someone's neck, and if you watch the video, you can see that he's got his other foot on the ground. He's only got one knee on the guy's neck, and so he obviously wasn't putting a lot of force on him. But I do think that he could have been trained better, and in that situation, the training could have. I don't think it would have saved Floyd's life because he was already had a ton of fentanyl in him, but it would have stopped the idea that the cop had killed him and that the cop had murdered him, and that would have stopped the riots. So I think in general, police need to be trained better, especially in it looks like that police department, in hand-to-hand type combat, and sort of getting the training so that if you're in a situation, you know how to de-escalate that situation without making things worse.
Yeah. And recently the autopsy report for George Floyd came out. It said that there were no life-threatening injuries identified. It was just like a buildup of different things that led to his death. Obviously, the officer kneeling on the back of his neck didn't really help. But in the way that human anatomy lines up, and since there was nothing pressed up against the front of his neck, George Floyd's breath was not actually cut off by the officer kneeling on the back of his neck. Some people may be angry about that, but that is just the fact. Because, I mean, if you have someone, like, put your hand on the back of your neck and push really hard, and then see if that cuts your breath off, and then put your hand on the front of your neck and press just as hard and see which one has an effect. The back of your neck will not cut off your breath unless he was pushing like ridiculously hard, and he was not. But George Floyd would have perished no matter what had happened that night, because he was very, very high on several different drugs. It says right here in the autopsy report that he had 11 NGML for fentanyl, norepinephrine, 4 anap, methamphetamine, 11 hydroxyl delta 9, delta 9 carboxide, cocaine, caffeine positive. So he had a lot of stuff in him. So he was definitely, yeah, he had just about, he had a lot in him. He was definitely going to perish no matter what happened. But that does not excuse the officer's actions. So I do believe that there is no reason to, there should be teaching that when someone is saying, I can't breathe, that you take a step back, you can remove yourself from the situation enough that you can say, okay, well, there's no reason for me to kneel on his neck anymore. If it comes to the point where you're restraining a violent criminal and they are trying to hurt you, and in order to restrain them, your knee has to go on the back of their neck, or maybe on their back, or whatever, wherever it lines up to keep them from killing you and other officers or citizens, then I would say that's okay. But in George Floyd's instance, it's a little different, just due to the situation. So yeah, that's my opinion on that. We already have 3 messages today. So
I'll add my thoughts. In general, I think that any sort of reform that needs to be done to policing should not be done on a national scale, because that's the same thing as saying the federal government should set wide overall laws for the economy. The government doesn't know the situation in each police precinct. It doesn't know. There are a lot of police groups out there already that have fantastic training, have fantastic records, and then there are some that don't work as well because of XYZ. So I think in general, it should not be a top-down federal government changes some sort of legislation for it, but rather each individual police precinct looks at it and says, okay, what do we need to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in reality, me and Spencer, we both agree on this one for sure. The federal government should, in very few instances, should really never just step in and create overall arching laws for the entire country. Because, everywhere in this country is different. Obviously, laws about, for instance, agriculture and farming would be different in the New England part of the country versus how they would be in the Midwest versus how they would be out in the middle of Utah or Arizona. Obviously, those places are different for each one. So, it's just one example. Things like crime, the people's way of life, things like that, they're different for each place. So everything should be curated for individual states, cities, municipalities that can analyze their curriculum and their training and say, okay, this is what we need to change. This is what we can do better. Now, we do not, I mean, Spencer, with us, say we agree on some things, but I mean, we're kind of unsure what we completely lined up on this one together with each other. But things like make sure you shoot, if you're going to shoot someone, make sure you shoot them in the leg. That makes no sense at all. Anyone who disagrees with me, feel free to say so. Because, I mean, for instance, there was the Ricardo Munoz guy. The guy jumped at the officer with a knife and sprinted at him. I mean, if he had stopped and taken the time to turn around and aim his pistol, which I'm guessing was either a Glock or a Smith & Wesson, at the man that was charging him with a knife, if he had taken the split second to turn around and do that, by the time that he was able to aim and accurately get a shot, because obviously cops are not competition perfect shooters, by the time he got a shot, and let's say it did hit him in the leg, the chances that he would already be dead are high. So that's not realistic.
Right.
Things like being less, brutal in terms of how you arrest someone for various different things they're doing, those could be analyzed for a change. But I mean, things like that are just dumb.
Well, and the idea of shooting someone in the leg, as soon as you go to a gun range, you know that is complete bullcrap. And the reason is that if you go to a gun range, and I encourage all of you that are listening, if you can, go to the gun range, get some actual training with firearms so you know not only what they're capable of, but what they do, so that way you're not afraid of them or anything like that. And once you start shooting down range, you put a target out 15 yards, and you mark on there a square that is the thickness of someone's leg, or even two legs, and then you try to shoot it. Chances are that in a set controlled area where you know no one's shooting at you, you have all the time in the world to shoot this target. Chances are you're either going to miss it or just nick that square or various other things. And so you can be a police officer, you can get that training that bumps up your skill level to be able to hit that square, but then all of a sudden you dump in a bunch of adrenaline and a bunch of stress that is happening from a dangerous situation, and your fine motor skills are the first thing that go in that situation. And in that case, that brings it down. I won't say exactly, because I don't know the exact proportion, so to speak, but that brings your accuracy down a lot more. So shooting at the center of mass is what is going to be able to give you the best chance of surviving yourself.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think on that note, we can go ahead and take our first message of the day.
Yeah.
Coleson Harrington, what's up, man? How you doing? I'm excited for our talk in a couple weeks. Police reform, huh? It's needed, but it needs to be common sense, I think that we've rushed it, and now we're sitting in a place where we're seeing an increase in crime, a decrease in police activity, and we're still seeing similar issues that we were seeing 3 and just a year ago. And we're also seeing departments struggling to maintain their public safety. So I think it's needed, but I think it needs to also make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Spencer.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points. I think that the rush, people have had a knee-jerk reaction, and that knee-jerk reaction has been to swing in the completely opposite direction. So far, that some places are trying to defund the police and are trying to replace it with social workers or anything like that. And the statistics and the just common sense, like you were talking about, shows that doesn't work. And sure, there may need to be police reform, but we need to do it at a pace where we can see each individual change, how that affects things, and whether that change was good. Because if we just all of a sudden get rid of the police, we have changed so many things that it's impossible to tell whether you could have just lowered the number of police, or you could have just changed patrolling routes or various other things to get an even better result. But as we can see, when you get rid of the police entirely, it turns out horribly.
Yeah, like Minneapolis is the perfect example.
Yep.
The mayor just signed like a $2 million thing to try to put some money back into the police department because they had defunded it, and like most of the officers left, and their crime, I think it went up like it was like 80 or something percent. I mean, it was really high. Their crime and the homicide rate went up really high because all the criminals were just like, hey, there's no cops anymore. We can do whatever the heck we want. It's exactly what happens. I mean, so yeah, common sense, absolutely. I mean, if we were to run it, like when the Black Lives Matter, everyone heard defund the police, and then they saw a couple things that were made out to be what they weren't really, and they just believed it, and then it became this. Everyone was running at breakneck speed to defund the police, to call against them. I mean, there were even individuals who said that we should kill all the police, which is absolutely ludicrous.
Wow.
Yeah, that takes there. I mean, there's like different levels of craziness when you hear things like crazy, insane, or maybe crazy, stupid, insane, downright ridiculous. And I think that borderlines. I don't really know the word for it. Ludicrous isn't enough. I mean, that's just. Yeah, that to saying you want to just kill all the police, that to me is horrible. But yeah, I mean, when you come at things and people don't really look at them and analyze what's going on in some of these instances, then they're not saying the truth. For instance, a good example of the Breonna Taylor incident. Individuals just saw that a black girl had been killed by cops. What they didn't see is that they announced themselves peacefully. The boyfriend shot first. The cops returned fire, and yes, they did return fire with. When it came out that they were shot like 30-something rounds into the apartment, which that's like all 3 full magazines out of their guns. So I mean that seems a little excessive to me. But when it comes to excessive force, my opinion there is pretty conservative. But yeah, I mean, it has to be common sense. Absolutely. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent there. But yeah, it has to be common sense. Things have to be intelligent, because when you just do stuff, or whether it's the mob or whether it's whatever it is, and you don't wait to see the results of which, then you were exposed to bad circumstances. For instance, just like I said, Minneapolis, they said defund the police. The city council and mayor said, okay, let's defund the police, and now they're paying for it with literally their lives.
Yeah, and this may be one of the places where you and I disagree. And for me, if a cop is in a situation where they have to use a gun to defend themselves, personally, I don't care if they fire 1 round or 5 mags. To me, the amount of rounds that they put out doesn't make a difference. The difference is whether they needed to shoot in that situation. If they did, then personally, I don't care how many rounds they shoot, as long as they were justified in shooting it.
Yeah, I mean, what you say makes sense. Yeah, I totally don't believe in holding back, especially if they're being shot at and they didn't shoot first, which, I mean, they don't. So they're being shot at, they didn't shoot first, they're responding. But I mean, instances where like it's inside of an apartment or in the middle of a neighborhood and things like that, if let's say, a normal magazine has 10, 15 rounds in it, that's a lot of ammo just blasting around pretty fast. So I mean, I do agree with you there, but I also have to say that, like, it depends on some of the situations, because if you're in an apartment building, 50 rounds out of a pistol will go through anything, and that will kill all kinds of people.
I do think that officers and anyone who uses a gun is responsible for each round that they put out. But if they need to put out a larger amount of rounds, then I think that's fine. But yeah, you're right.
Absolutely.
If someone's shooting a gun, they are responsible for each round that goes out of that gun.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay, we'd have another. Yeah, that's just 7 messages here. So.
And the interesting thing, the George Floyd case, and why I've been closely following it, and if you guys are interested, please decide to Go to my Instagram and follow me. I make a daily post about the trial. I don't think George Floyd's going to be charged. Or not George Floyd, I'm sorry. Chauvin is going to be charged. According to all records from his police department, they were trained to apply slight pressure to the area between the base of the skull and between the start of the shoulder blades, so right around the neck area, in which to maintain control of a suspect, I guess is what it said, to while they wait for EMS. Now, some people even speculate to include the prosecution if he actually even kneeled on the neck, how much pressure was applied to the neck, because in most cases, if you observe somebody being suffocated by that.
I do, yeah. He was kneeling. The amount of pressure and stuff like that. That's totally. People can say different things about that, but yeah, I mean, I don't believe he should be tried for it either, because he did what he was trained to do, and the debate now is whether or not that training needs to be changed, and if it does need to be changed, what should it be changed to? It's not just, oh, this man was there and this guy died, so we need to just throw him in jail, because in reality, he was no more responsible for his choices than some brainwashed guy, because I mean, he had been taught this is what you do in a circumstance, and so that's what he did, and he followed it to the letter.
Yeah, and if you've been trained a certain way, especially in a stressful situation like we've been talking about, that's why police officers train with firearms, is that in a situation where they don't have time to clearly think, they're able to still functionally operate that firearm. And the same thing can be applied here. He had been taught one way of doing things, and he hadn't been taught another way, so he went with the way that he had been taught. And whether he had been taught the right thing or not is what it comes down to now, because he did what he was taught and what he thought was the correct thing to do by that training. And actually, I found the stats of the Minneapolis things. They had to spend $6.4 million trying to get the police back, and they even had to, quote unquote, rent police from other areas.
Yeah, I know it's really bad over there. I've seen different things like that. I've seen stuff on Instagram and stuff like that. People who are saying how bad it is over there. So yeah, it's pretty bad. But you know, it's just an example. They went hard and they didn't think about the consequences, and now they're paying for it. Yeah, I'm taking another message here.
You would have observed strangulation, not suffocation. But since cause of death was ruled as suffocation, a lot of people, to also include the prosecuting attorney, do speculate that George Floyd had a lethal dose of fentanyl in the system, which caused him to die from positional asphyxia due to excited delirium. However, the curious question is the officer guilty of manslaughter negligently due to the fact that he never checked on the mental condition of George Floyd? However, the other curious thing is that the George Floyd family was just awarded, I think it was either $27 million or $34 million dollars in a wrongful death suit, which is civil. So it's a very curious case at this point. I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah,
I think it's.
Yeah, they did. They did get all that money, and personally, I don't think they should have. But yeah, the fact is that they did. I am curious to see where this goes too, because if they let the police officer off, then I think there are going to be a whole nother round of riots about it.
Yeah, and I think it really this case is less so about upholding the law and what's right and wrong, and more so about following public opinion. Because like you just said there, Spencer, if they let the cops go, if they let that cop go, if they let Chauvin go, then they're gonna have a whole another bouch of what could be protests and riots because they let him go. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't his fault, and like Real Talk said, his lungs when he died, the autopsy said that his lungs were filled with liquid. So everyone's saying they use the phrase when Floyd said I can't breathe, and which was actually a result of how many drugs he was on. They say that, and they say it was the officer's fault for kneeling on the back of his head. And there's two things that come up. One, if he had died because the officer was actually choking him from being on the back of his neck, which he wasn't, then he wouldn't have his lungs full of fluid. He just would have died from a cut off, his oxygen being cut off. And second off, he wasn't kneeling that hard, so it wouldn't have happened. So yeah, I mean, these kind of things, these are just evidence that goes more so to show that it wasn't actually his fault, but the fact that this trial is still going and that it hasn't been cut off already, to me, I just look at it and go, okay, this is just a matter of trying to appease people enough that something else doesn't happen or to someone gets their way or whatever it may be, because now we know with this autopsy report that Chauvin is innocent, but he's still being tried. So what actually happens to him is it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And like you were talking about, this is kind of just political theater. There's no real charge that they can get him put up on. I believe like the highest charge they could realistically get him charged on and actually like convicted of would be accidental manslaughter. And that's not what the mob wants. The mob wants him put up there with murder, and that there's just no way of getting this trial around. And part of this trial is them just completely ignoring the real issue. The issue is not that the guy kneeled on his neck. The issue is that the guy had the training that said to kneel on his neck. And that's where this comes back around to is that training should have been different. And that is what this trial should be highlighting, but instead it's just highlighting the officer.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have one more comment, then we'll finally be up to date.
All right.
Here we go.
Just be careful, Coleson. Keep in mind that the one way they can get rid of guns is to justify that, well, police are getting shot at when they're busting down people's doors for, stupid shit in the middle of the night. But my real quick take on this is that police should be well more educated, much better paid. And there's way too many laws. They're chasing too many crazy laws all over the place. And so basically there's too much for them to do, and they don't do it well anymore. And it's a shame.
I completely agree on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are so many laws that the cops can't even keep up with it. I mean, literally, they're being called every other thing for someone called him stupid, and that somehow breaks the law. Or, that's obviously not true, but I mean, crap like that. They're being called for every little thing because there's so many laws, especially in big Democrat-run cities where the restrictions for everything, especially during now with COVID, are ridiculous. But yes, I also believe that cops should be paid more. And I mean, personally, me and Spencer, we are pro-gun, Second Constitution. But we've both been around guns all our lives and have had extensive use of them, and understand the rules of how a gun works. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad used to own a gun store, and he would host shooting parties with his buddies and with their buddies and yada yada yada. And so we would have big shooting parties on my property, and we would have lots of fun like that. And I learned from an early age because my dad starts teaching all of us to, me and my siblings all to shoot at when we turned 5, and so I learned at an early age how to use a gun, what to do, what was safe, and stuff like that. So I understand the basics of it. Now there are some times where a cop may come into a police force and maybe he's never even touched a gun before, or they're afraid of them or wherever it may be, and then all of a sudden now they're carrying one and they've got the brand of police on them, which some people just look at, instead of looking at peacemaker and lawkeeper, some people look at it as murderer and things like that. They stereotype them wrongly. So I believe that in terms of firearm training, there should be much more training, because I mean, that's a weapon, right? That's a gun that has a distinct capability to do good or evil. If an officer is well trained, for instance, me and Spencer, we were ever to be in a situation where we needed to protect ourselves, I know that both of us are accurate enough with a pistol or rifle that we can easily not hurt anyone else while still taking out a target, and keep ourselves relatively cool under pressure while we're doing it. But some cops may not have that same capability. More training will help to combat against that. I mean, this is, especially with such a focus on gun control and everything that's happening right now with the country and how controversial that is. More responsibility with a firearm, I think, could only do good. And I know that cops do have firearm training as it is now. I just think that it can be better. I've seen some of it. I haven't seen a lot. So anyone who knows more than me about that, feel free to tell me off or to chime in. But yeah, I mean, I think more training can only do better in that circumstance. But that's one thing where there's no negative, but things like removing how an officer can come at a violent criminal, for instance, with George Floyd, saying an officer cannot kneel between the shoulder blades and the back of the skull for a suspect, sometimes it takes multiple officers to restrain a suspect, to put cuffs on them because they're being really violent or whatever it may be. And to remove that ability for theirs, and then also to put the thing that if they do it, then they are in big trouble with this stereotype going on with George Floyd, that presents a pretty serious issue, in my opinion.
Well, and you had a very good point in your comment about the laws in this country. And I completely agree with you. One of the best ways that we could reform the police is by reforming the laws that the police have to follow. That's one of the things about our government now, is that so much of it has become bloated, and there have been so many laws and so many pieces of legislation that have been passed into law that it's hard to keep track of it all. And when you're a police officer, and you're in an area, there are a lot of more Democrat areas that have stricter policing laws as well. We talk about Democrat gun laws, but there are also areas with more strict policing laws. And when a police officer has less freedom to do certain things, right? We're not saying that a police officer should ever have the ability to just go up to someone and shoot them. But if a police officer has to approach a situation a certain way, or has to, under law ABC, let the intended target know that they are coming to arrest them, or various other things, then you give that police officer less room to adapt to the situation, and you give that officer less room to adapt to what's happening, and less room to make a better decision than what the law is, because the law is not arbitrary, but it is something that is set off from the situation, completely separate from it, that says you must do this action. But in a situation where that action is not available, then the police officer, or that option is not the best option available, then the police officer has to go with that option, even though that may not be the best option. So I agree. I think that one of the biggest ways that we could reform the police for the better is by reforming the various things that the police have to pay attention to when they go out to fight or handcuff criminals. Is they should have more freedom to adapt to individual situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's perfect. Yeah. Go ahead and take another message now.
Yeah, so what are you guys trying to portray right here? Just wondering.
First off, man, you sound pretty young. So Stereo is an 18-up app, so just be aware of that. But what we're talking about today is police reform, the implications of it, should it happen, should it not, and just really generally police reform in general, what the effects are, what we're seeing the effects of it being right now, things like defund the police and some of the pretty serious consequences that's having in our country right now, such as Minneapolis. I mean, a homicide rate up as high as it is in Minneapolis right now, and the millions of dollars they're having to spend to combat their dumb mistake in the middle of COVID, no less. It's not doing anybody any favors. So yeah, those are just all things that they should be keeping in mind that they're not.
Yeah, and Minneapolis, there was an article back in December 2020 that the headline basically reads, Minneapolis puts $8 million into the police funding, but keeps the force at the same level. And that's sometimes it just amazes me what our government does, because it assumes that if you dump more money into something, it'll fix it. That has rarely worked. And that's a similar case here. You can't just dump money into a policing area and expect things to get better. You have to actually actively engage and get more police officers if that's necessary. I am not opposed. In fact, I am in favor of having more police officers as long as they are trained properly and are trained to de-escalate situations until absolutely necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And also good cops. I mean, because me and Spencer aren't naive. We recognize that there are bad cops in some instances. And I would say that I'm pretty sure it's reasonable to say that the amount of bad cops compared to good cops, and you guys know what I'm talking about there, is very negligent. But for those that are unfit for service in the police department, and this is just kind of a little 2 cents off the thing, it's a little bit to the side, police unions and things like that, they work just like labor unions. They keep companies, in this instance, the police departments, from firing individuals. And when you have such a serious instance as a person that is directly responsible for the safety and well-being of the community and has a direct effect on every single person living in that community, I think things like police unions that protect people that maybe sometimes shouldn't be in there. I think actions like that are not okay. I don't see any good coming from that. Now I can say that there probably are some good that they do, but it's kind of I would say that's up to everyone to make their choice on how they feel like that.
Yeah.
Take another message.
Well, the thing I always thought was funny is that in the era of police reform, when we wanted less police involvement, we were all okay with the police officers arresting people for not wearing a mask in public.
Yeah.
I always thought that was dumb. I mean, especially like 4th of July stuff, and I heard that the cops were having to arrest people for not wearing their masks at 4th of July parties when they were like, we're going to have a big party, and they're like, no, you're not, or you're going to get arrested. And I'm like, that's just really crappy. And maybe that borderlines, kind of really goes over with the people who are pro versus anti-mask, or that kind of stuff are there. But I think forcing police to just follow dumb laws all the time is, like you said, Real or I'm not sure if it was Real or Roblin, that said that there are so many laws in the country that it makes it difficult for them to follow. If the cops are having to cops are responsible for the safety and well-being of a community. They police it, obviously, keep criminals out of it, maintain the law, traffic laws, stuff like that, right? They have a lot of responsibility to take care of. And when you have places that just keep piling on laws that are ridiculous and dumb all of the time, I mean, you just get cops, and it's like, no wonder they're leaving right now. First off, no one's caring about them anymore, except for the people that, like us and others, who care about them. But then there's this image that the most of the population doesn't care about them. So there's just mass exoduses from police departments all over the country, especially during the BLM riots. And these officers help all of us every single day. I mean, whether you see it or not, they have a direct effect. Their actions have a direct effect on all of us. And I mean, they really do work to protect us all the time. So I mean, it stands to reason that we give them the best tools to do their jobs, which their job is to protect us. So I mean, things like training better with a firearm, and maybe a couple other things. I'm not thinking of many others at this moment. That can help would be great, but then things that restrict them, like you can only behave a certain way in this instance, or that dumb one where during the riots when everyone was saying we should have cops walk around with was like therapists or was something like that.
Social workers.
Yeah, social workers. Oh, I was just like, oh my gosh, that's just oh, that's unbelievably dumb. I couldn't even believe my ears. But yeah, and these are things that have direct effects on us, and these are the men and women that work to protect us every day. So, those are just the truths. Those are the facts.
Yeah. In my opinion, I don't think there is any situation that is a even potentially dangerous one where there should be a social worker, therapist there in place of a cop. Certainly not, and not a police and a social worker, because then all of a sudden you have basically this unarmed person, and if this situation is going to turn deadly, that person is much easier for that armed criminal or deadly criminal to kill than a police officer would be.
Yep, absolutely. Got another message here.
And then one of the guys said that they need more education, but I don't always know what that's going to do. People forget in this country, one of the leading causes of medical death is medical malpractice or accidental medical accidents. 2019, 250,000 people died underneath medical malpractice, or doctors making simple mistakes, as they call it. And the biggest contributing factor was medication. Doctors weren't checking people's allergies relative to their medications. People would take a medication and they would asphyxiate, or they would have a reaction that would kill them. One, I don't see people calling for reform of the medical system, and two, doctors are revered as some of the most educated people in our society. Yet hundreds of thousands of people die literally every year on their watch to medical malpractice.
Yeah, when I say education, I mean it has to be, like I said before, it has to be very specific. When you go and you just say, okay, we need more education for cops, and then you leave it open-ended, and you don't say, what can be improved in certain things, and also, taking into account how it may be different in certain areas or cities across the country, then you create what can only be a negative situation. When I say maybe we could have more training for police, I can't think of anything else besides firearm training, because police manuals do a really good job of preparing them for everything else, right? They don't say walk up and just randomly punch a dude in the face if he makes you angry. They teach officers how to keep cool, how to calm situations down, and you see them do it all the stinking time, especially during the riots. There were officers who were constantly aware of what was going on. Yeah, they were berated, and yet they still did a very good job of keeping under cool, right? And keeping themselves cool, and trying to maintain the most peaceful situations possible. But then people just demonize them, and so I mean, these are just simple things. But when you make too many generalizations about something, then I mean, you can lead to really just negative situations.
And I think for me, in my mind, the two things on top of more firearms training that could be implemented. One is increased awareness of police officers of how to de-escalate situations and make situations less tense, less intense, so that way there is less likelihood of a dangerous outcome. And I think generally police officers do a good job of doing that and trying to de-escalate situations, but there's always room, I think, to reemphasize that to police officers. Okay, here are the proper tactics to de-escalate without putting your life in danger, because I can very easily de-escalate a situation as a police officer by putting my gun on the ground. That de-escalates it for about 5 seconds before someone picks that up and shoot me. So you do need to have proper ways to de-escalate. And then I guess my other way of thinking is having police officers get more hand-to-hand close combat training. So that way, if an officer has more training in more and more different moves that they can pull with just their hands, and not kung fu, nothing that is more flowery than it is useful, but actual useful hand-to-hand combat skills. If police officers are trained with that and they get enough training with that to feel comfortable with it, then that weapon that they have, even if that's a taser, will be and especially if it's a firearm, will be a more of a last resort, because they have all of this hand-to-hand combat that they're able to use before it gets to the point where they need to use a weapon. So I think that would be a good way of helping reform police, is getting police more hand-to-hand combat training where they're able to use their hands to restrain a criminal or various other situations without having to resort to that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's definitely true. The more we can do for them is the best that we can do. I mean, why, if we have the ability to teach officers who realistically use hand-to-hand combat way more than any person who attends like a taekwondo or kung fu class does, they could use it daily sometimes. Why not go ahead and teach them that? And obviously, I'm not saying teach every officer taekwondo or kung fu or jujitsu or crap like that. Just simple things like if someone's pointing a gun at you and they're close, how to get out of their hands, how to grab a knife away from someone safely if they were to charge at you. Because maybe they already teach that. I don't know. I haven't attended a police academy, so anyone who knows better than me, feel free to leave a comment.
Yeah,
another
and,
message here though. After you're done, Spencer.
There actually was a situation where there was this naked guy who I believe was high, who had a samurai sword on New Year's Day, and this guy had a sword. Okay, he was very obviously out of his mind, and the police tried various other methods, and I believe they tried to use something similar to a social worker, and the guy had a sword. He also had an AR-15, and if a social worker had realistically gone to that with no police backup, the end result would not have been pretty. That social worker would have certainly been hurt, if not killed, and that's the type of situation where you have to use force, because you have to meet a person with the level of intensity that they are putting out. If someone has a sword, then I need to not just go up with my hands raised saying, hey, let's talk about this. I have to take proactive action against them in order to ensure that I and other people are safe.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll take another message here.
I cannot stand these people that say defund the police. Okay, if you are gonna, cry about these cops killing people unarmed and all that, why would you defund the police? If anything, we should, reform the police and give them more money for training, So basically, when you say defund the police, you're basically saying that you don't want them to get more training to prevent them from killing people.
Absolutely, and it's also worth noting. I mean, places like Minneapolis, you've already mentioned it already. The individuals there that have been killed from the higher homicide rate than what usually have been killed, because of that higher homicide rate. If you think about it, those are probably not the same individuals who were in the Black Lives Matter rallies that were saying that we need more, we need to defund the police and crap like that. These are probably just other average, everyday citizens that are living their lives, that are paying for it because someone decided to present their opinion of defund the police, and they were violent about it, and they were aggressive. And so then Minneapolis, city council, the Minneapolis government said, okay, this group is saying, let's defund the police. They look to be this group that has power, so we're just going to do that. And now individuals are paying for it with their lives. Defund the police, abolish the police. I mean, even so much as the ridiculously insane, completely retarded, kill the police saying, I mean, crap like this, it doesn't, when you analyze it, it doesn't make any sense. And something I constantly try to do with every bit of information I read, especially when I'm reading about situations like this, where it's very much so conservative versus left and crap like that. I really try to analyze deeply what is the other person saying, right? Why are they saying this? Where are their beliefs coming from? And the vast majority of the individuals in the BLM rallies who are saying this, I can say, oh, okay, well, they just look at this and they see a brand name and they are drug into this, but they're not really bad people. The ones that lead this are the bad individuals, right? But then you look at other people who are now continually saying things like defund the police, even though they're now seeing the consequences. And I'm like, now, if you had said this before we actually started defunding the police, I would just call you a communist, or you didn't really know what you were talking about. But now I think you just gotta be straight up stupid if you're looking at that and going, oh, higher homicide rate in every single city that has defunded the police. Huh, let's do it some more. That's like someone punches you in the face and you're like, huh,
That hurt.
I don't think it'll hurt next time. Punch me again. Like, what the heck?
Yeah. And not only will the idea that if you get rid of the police, crime will either stay the same or go down, that's just the most dumb common sense thing. If you just think about that for about 5 seconds, you'll realize, oh, wait, that's dumb. But on top of that, if the amount of self-defense killings and self-defense uses of firearms will naturally go up, because if the police don't exist anymore, there are going to be more criminals that are willing to break into houses or break into cars or do harm to people. And as a result, there are armed Americans out there, and those armed Americans, there will be a higher number of them, which will have their houses broken into, or will have to use their firearms in one way or another. And so you're going to not only have a higher homicide rate, but you're also going to have a higher number of law-abiding American gun owners that will have to discharge their firearms in protection of their own life. And I'm not saying that those two are on the same level at all. I think that the homicides are completely terrible, and I think that a law-abiding gun owner using their gun to defend themselves or their family is 100% justified. But as you get rid of the police, people are going to need to resort to different methods to protect themselves, and that's going to, in a lot of cases, end up being those homeowners or those family men which use guns. And that's exactly what the left says they don't want. And so the natural conclusion is, okay, either you want no police, and then people are going to have to use their guns more. Oh, but you also don't want guns. So if you get rid of our guns, the criminals have nothing now to stop them.
Yeah, it was like that one video, which you can look it up online. Just look up like BLM reparations or something like that. A lady who claimed that any individual who was black had every right in the world to run into a Gucci's or a Nike because they needed clothing, or to run into a Walmart and steal everything they wanted because they needed food. And when I heard Gucci's and Nike, I'm like, if you're really striving for clothing, Gucci's and Nike you should just go to Goodwill or something. I mean, if you're really looking for a place to rob, I mean, that's just, and she was just spouting nonsense. But it's just this same recurrent thing. You got to think about the consequences of the actions. Police reform, in some instances, depending on where it's at and who it is, could do good, but arbitrarily saying defund the police will not do any good. It's been proven, and the consequences are being shown. People are paying for them. So it's important to keep in mind that, you know, overall, general, absolute statements that have effects such as that are not okay. But now, also on the other side of that, absolute statements such as if we defund the police, bad things will happen. That's 100% positive. We know that's happened every single time that it's happened now. Every time we defund the police in every city that's happened in, the crime or homicide rate has gone up in all of them. So it's been proven now that there are consequences to our actions. So, yeah. Take another message if you're okay with that, Spencer.
Yep.
Yeah, so what I mean is, as more education, just like things that, how to recognize somebody that's having a bipolar incident, or, for police to be educated about, the signs of domestic abuse, just general, that kind of stuff that they're going to come up against that would help them deal with people, like a basis in psychology and just understanding, all these things. Anyway, sorry, thanks.
Sure.
I can see the use in that. Yeah, I mean, like if you're called in for something and then you see a woman with her husband, obviously, and it looks like she's got like red eyes, or it looks like she's been hurt or beaten, then you could analyze the situation, and be like, okay, obviously this guy is abusive, right? Things like that. I could definitely see the use in that. Yeah.
And I can see the use in giving police officers that information and having them learn it and memorize it, rather than having a completely separate psychologist or psychiatrist come out, because then it's a package deal and you've solved a number of problems. One, it's less costly to deploy one person than two people, and you're not putting that psychologist in harm's way. And yeah, I think those are some good things that police could be educated on. I don't know in general the current level that police are educated on psychological issues and abuse signs and stuff like that. I know they have some training, but I don't know exactly how far that extends. But yeah, I think I'd be okay with increasing the amount of kind of psychological awareness training that they have.
Yeah, I can see some use in that. Yeah. Moving on to our next comment here.
Coleson, I don't disagree with you on officers learning Taekwondo, etc. But if that happens, then you're going to have all these SJWs screaming and yelling because the officers beat the crap out of somebody, or the George Floyds of the world died because the officer roundhoused him and he died because of that. I don't know what the answer is, but nobody's ever going to be 100% happy.
Yep, absolutely. I'm not worried about satisfying everybody, because there are just people who will never be satisfied. And here, controversy time. I think that nobody did anything wrong in George Floyd's instance, and I think he brought the whole thing upon himself. Give me your comments, some of your hate, because George Floyd was a convict. He had a criminal record. And it's up for debate whether or not the officers knew that before they were called in. There are people who claim that they did, people who claim that they didn't. So that's up for debate. I think that every action they took after that, they did a very good job of trying to make sure that everything came peacefully. In the end, it did, result in his death. And I would say that is more so his fault than anybody else's. So, $27 million to his family is ridiculous. I mean, I was joking with my sibling today. I was like, if you get on drugs, I'm not going to help you. I'm getting $27 million for that.
Yeah,
so, so controversy.
I agree almost 100% with you. I agree 99%. I think that in that situation, everything was done basically the best they could. The only difference I would say between you and me, or I guess the situation, your view of it, I agree 100%. The only thing I would change is what we've been talking about, is that training that the officer received beforehand. But I think the situation itself, what the officers did, they tried absolutely everything they could to de-escalate and to make the situation as good as possible. And it's unfortunate that he died, but he died from the drugs, and the autopsy and everything else points to that.
Yep, the autopsy says right there on the first line, it says, get the exact quote here, no life-threatening injuries identified. So if the officer really had caused him to die from kneeling on the back of his neck, then it would have been listed as a life-threatening injury, because obviously it would have hurt through his neck. It could have broken something, stuff like that. But obviously that has not been said. It was then said later, that he was, toxicology says that he had so many drugs in him, he was going to die. So yes, that was his fault. And then things like, what could their training have been? Could an officer's training have been better? Because one thing have changed over another. I mean, there's a lot of different factors to consider there. Things that have a pretty, serious effect. And so they need to be considered carefully, what the results of those actions will be. So yeah, I mean, I think that's something that everyone has to make up their mind for individually, because any choice that someone makes is going to be, they're going to be people who disagree with them. I'm obviously going to have people who disagree against me. And if I believe that the officer was the one wrong and George Floyd did nothing wrong, then I would have people like me and Spencer who disagree. So this is just a simple thing. So everyone who's listening who may or may not already have an opinion on this, and I would find it hard that any American adult over 18 does not have an opinion on this already. Make sure you get your own opinion, seek your own facts, because there's a lot going on here.
Yeah. And there are a lot of opinions on police reform. I think generally, I just think that could there be more training done and more ways to reform the police? Yes. But we have, in terms of defund the police and social workers and various things like that, we have swung completely in the opposite direction of having police, and I think we've swung too far in that direction, and we need to step it back significantly.
Yeah. You have one more message for the day. I think we can go ahead and take that, and then I don't know, Spencer, you want to wrap it up for the day, or you want to keep going?
I'm good with keeping going, but that's up to you.
All right, well, let's see where this message takes us then.
All right.
So I agree with you both about the George Floyd thing, but the only caveat is I think that some of the ugliest police brutality stuff that we see, which it gets overblown, I know, I do understand that, but to a degree, the worst, absolute worst of it is them basically beating on somebody or doing something once they're subdued. And so there seems to be a disconnect between, when somebody's handcuffed and they're down on the ground, like, stop fucking with them. And so I understand the adrenaline and all that kind of thing. And it's going to happen sometimes. But I think that the overarching thing with the George Floyd was that he was subdued. He wasn't a threat. He was on the ground. He was handcuffed, from what I understand. And then they missed the warning about him, obviously being in physical distress. And so it's like, that if they don't want police brutality stuff to look so bad, that's like the number one thing that needs to be addressed, I think. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the stuff like this, you see people, I mean, like, could they have done better? Yeah, I mean, if they weren't human, yeah, they could have done better. But in reality, I think that as human beings and being imperfect, because humans are imperfect, I would say the only way to make sure that there is absolutely zero police brutality, no overreaction, people who say excessive force, you want to remove excessive force, you want to remove any kind of police brutality, any need for future police reform, okay, let's go ahead and create the Terminator in real life. We'll just make humans slaves, and the police can do everything. Robot police can do everything for us. That is the solution. It's not. They're people, right? So when you have someone who threatens their life, then yes, they're going to respond, and even just a simple arrest can lead to, maybe not the perfect choice, or maybe not a good choice at all, just from adrenaline, because these are people in the same respect as every other person that is on here, and me and Spencer. All this, these are all just basic facts. These are people. They make imperfect decisions. They react to fear sometimes in the exact same way that all of us would. And training can help combat that a little bit. They might be able to make a little bit better decision, or be a little more accurate when they shoot a gun, or keep their adrenaline restrained, or keep their focus enough. And training might be able to counteract some of it, but these are human beings. They are imperfect, and for being perfect and human, for being imperfect humans, I think they do a really perfect job.
Yeah, and I think that police just we're not denying that there are situations where police do overstep what they're supposed to do if they have someone tied, or they have someone on the ground. Then if the suspect is in that situation, the police officer should not then proceed to continue using force, or then start using force. But I think that those types of situations do get covered disproportionately compared to the rest of situations. We'll say that is 1% of all police interactions, which I know is probably a very high percentage. We'll say that it's 1% of all police interactions, and with the police officer overstepping their use of force. But for the coverage of it acts like it's 10%, or it's 15% of all police interactions. So I agree that those types of situations are terrible when they happen, and that they should be addressed, and the individual police officers in those should be questioned and not just let off the hook. But at the same time, I think that those situations are a small enough number and are relatively few enough that it does not make a significant difference in terms of what actually happens. I think the media could definitely do a better job on reporting these proportionally, because they certainly do not happen as often as we see them happening on TV.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree. It's portrayed like I would say even 15% feels like it's low compared to how much they cover it, especially during the riots. It was like every other word out of their mouth was defund the police, or police brutality, or we need to reform the police. So I would say it felt like, especially last year, it felt like it was like 75% of everything cops did. And now I feel like it's probably somewhere in the way they cover it, it could be made out to be like 25%, but really it's so low. And obviously, because of how low it is, I think the number could strictly just be attributed right up to human error, where training and other things will have no effect. But in the interest of having a conversation, me and Spencer are having this conversation because, we're going to talk about this, what could be done better. But in reality, like I said, I think that it's just straight up comes down to human error, by how many instances are, come down to police brutality or consider police brutality and things like that. There's just not enough of them to look at it and say, oh, this is systemic racism, or, this is poor training, or these are cops who are corrupt, or whatever it may be. The numbers are just, think about how many times, for instance, what really goes on around you. You know, for instance, anyone here who has a decent friend group, here's a challenge: go out and ask all of your friends how many times they've had a violent encounter with a cop, and the exact details of what went down inside that circumstance. I would make a pretty fair bet that the results of which, if you were to ask that, are not going to be police or violence. It's going to be, maybe the person did something dumb, right? If a person pulls a knife on a cop, the response is figure out what's going on. Like Jacob Blake went to go get something from the car that was found out to be a weapon. It looked like a weapon. He lost his life over it. That's not the cop's fault. Jacob Blake didn't want to be in that situation. He should not have done whatever put him in that situation. A perfect law-abiding citizen driving, whether they're driving their car or they are walking in a parking lot or whatever they're doing, if they're not doing things that are illegal, they're not going to be, they're not going to be approached by the police. If you're not going 80 when you're not supposed to be going 80, the cop's not going to pull you over for going too fast if you're obeying all the laws, right? If you're not clearly so doped up on drugs that the next thing you do could lead into a giant, whatever it may be, or obviously drugs are illegal and crap like that, then you don't want to get arrested for having, just heroin, right? You don't want to get arrested for having heroin. Don't have heroin. It's really a simple thing. It's like abortion. You don't want to get pregnant. Don't have sex. Problem solved, right? Simple thing. Abstinence is the best contraception, and so that was an abortion analogy, but that applies to crime, everything. You don't want to be in trouble with the cops. Don't do things that are going to get you in trouble. So if people really want to remove any instance of police brutality, then things that will keep people from doing illegal actions will be the best effect against that. Now, things like Ricardo Munez, right? His sister called the cops because her brother was the one that was being violent, right? So if her brother, which was Ricardo Munez, didn't want the cops to come, then he shouldn't have been there being violent at his family home for his sister to decide she needed to call the cops to come to the home. Problem solved, right? And this in the modern U.S., in this modern America, everyone has equal rights. Now, there are some who may be prejudiced in one way or another, and I would say that they are very, very small portion, ones that you might never even meet an actual real racist in your entire life. And so if someone disagrees with me, I've never met a racist, and I have met a lot of people, whether it's from things like being here on stereo to just other interactions that I have in my life. I've never met a person who's actually racist. And I spend a lot of time with people. I'm a social person and never met one. So I would say, it's probably a pretty fair assumption that the amount of our population, our country, who actually performs prejudice against one way or another to lead to instances that could be considered a bad cop or a corrupt cop are very, very little, right? And I'm making generalizations here. I don't have facts to back these up, so take it with your own 2 cents and with a grain of salt. But these are my opinions, right? I don't believe that there is racism in this country.
Sure.
There are racists. I don't believe that America is a racist country. There are racists. I'm not denying that. But I would say that it's a very, very, almost completely inconsequential number by how little there are.
Yeah, and you brought up an excellent point that I 100% agree with, and that's that if you don't want if you don't want you or someone else to get shot by a police officer, don't do something that's worthy of being shot by a police officer. If I'm charging at a police officer with a knife, then I deserve to be shot. If I interact with police officers several times a week, they're not necessarily lawn interactions, but I pass by several on most days, and nothing happens because I say hi. I say, I say good morning, good afternoon, thank you for what you do, and I walk on. And that interaction with the police officer turned out great. And it is an interaction that goes wonderfully because I did nothing that the police officer perceived as a danger to him or to someone else around him. So the biggest thing to stop people getting hurt by police officers is to educate people on how to do things that will not get you hurt by police officers. And that in general is not trying to hurt other people and not committing illegal acts.
Yeah, pretty stinking simple. So, like I said, the amount of acts in this country that could be considered corrupt cops and things like that are ridiculously low. It's completely inconsequential. And things that could be considered using police reform, in my opinion, I would boil them down to simple human error, right? I mean, these are people, these are humans. They make, they make decisions based on fight or flight, on their instincts, the same instincts that everyone else in this whole world has. We all feel fear. We all have, adrenaline, crap like that. These are real things that affect all of us. And to hold cops to a higher standard than that is not realistic. It's like, I mean, I hear people who are like, especially Black Lives Matter activists, that like cops need, if we're gonna have cops, they need to be this, or this. I'm like, what you're saying is we need to remove every ability they have that makes them human. I mean, you need to remove their ability to get an adrenaline rush. You need to remove their fight or flight instinct. You need to remove their emotions. I mean, these are all things that contribute to mistakes that we make every single day, that everyone makes every single day. And these cops, they just make them in a way that gets publicized a lot more. And during the BLM riots and everything, they got publicized really just because of race issues. And in terms of these issues that are violent, that come down to violent or could be considered inappropriate or too violent, or things that would be needing police reform, like we've been describing here for the past couple minutes, the amount of those that actually, let's say it's actually a Black person, very small, right? These are just facts that people have twisted, and they gotten this ideal into some people's minds, especially in the media and a lot of the left activists, SJW, stuff like that, where a cop needs to be perfect. They need to never make a mistake. They aren't allowed to feel fear. They can't get an adrenaline. And that's not reality.
Yeah.
Like I said, you don't want that to happen. Awesome. Let's create the Terminator next. And we can just turn everything into, oh man, what's that? I can't even remember what that intelligence is called. I feel dumb now. So, I mean, yeah. But, it sounds dumb, but I mean, really, when you think about it, cops really do an amazing job. You don't even hear about what 99.9% of what happens of police interactions every day. We don't even hear about them. We just hear about the things that may affect one person or another, or that people deem affects them or whatnot. But cops are not racist. In some instances, I mean, we've been talking about how they need more training, but really, I would say that those are just methods of appeasement for people to make them stop thinking. I mean, to defund the police or things like that, because some of these things could help them, sure. But I, as far as I know right now, I think cops have good training. I mean, I've never had a violent interaction with the cops, and I've hung out with cops even. My dad owning a gun store, he knew several local officers who would hang out in there all the time. He actually he knew most of the people in the local police department, and they never had issues. They never they were good, straight shooting people that didn't do anything wrong and would never do anything like these people are just insinuating that all cops do. It's painting with a broad brush when you should be painting with a needle.
And on top of that, if just because there are bad cops, and we can't deny that there are some bad cops out there, that is true. But if we have to defund the police because there are a couple bad cops, then we need to defund every profession, because every profession has a couple bad people in it. Like one of the people that commented earlier, we're talking about malpractice deaths. We should just cancel doctors, because we should defund doctors because lots of people have died from them. Okay, but as soon as you get rid of doctors, there are going to be many, many, many more people that die because they don't have access to that service that is provided. And that's that is a similar situation to police. If you get rid of police, sure, the police will no longer be able to kill people. That is true, because there will be no police. But then the consequences of that are so much more severe that people will begin to wonder, why did we cancel the police in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. And probably have about 9 minutes left here. So we'll go ahead and take another message here and kind of start wrapping stuff up.
Yep.
America's hella racist. The police are racist inherently. They go after minority people because they know they have no power and they don't have no lawyers. They're not gonna do anything. They're not gonna fight back. That's what they harass me. I've been pulled over 8 times in my life. I only have 1 fucking ticket to my name. That's police harassment.
I'm sorry, man. I don't know where you live, but no, America is not racist. Absolutely not.
And
you've read our.
Yeah, I'm going to use your argument right there against you. If the police had been truly racist and had truly been trying to harass you, you didn't talk to your driving skill or various other things. So I can't assume that you were driving perfectly or that you were, completely drunk. I can't put you on that spectrum. But you said you got pulled over, I believe, 8 times, but you only got 1 ticket. It completely refutes your argument, is that if you only got 1 ticket after being pulled over 8 times, then the police officers that pulled you over were not racist or not systematically racist. Otherwise, they would have given you a ticket much more than 1 out of 8 times.
Or, if they were really, quote unquote, racist, then, or they were harassing you for real, then after you've been pulled over 8 times, they can easily put you in jail for a period of time for having been pulled over 8 times, because after you have that many tickets, then yes, you can go to jail. So, no, police are not racist. Your own argument kind of just worked against you. And I'm wondering if he just thought you left a reply here.
Yep.
I guess not. No.
Give me a break. I've been pulled over 6 times and have never gotten a ticket.
Yeah, I know my dad's been pulled over before while I've been with him in the car, and the cops have just been like, okay, make sure you don't go fast before, make sure you don't, speed or, slow down a little bit. Just a warning, right? They don't even write you up. If America was really racist and you've been pulled over 8 times, then, they could have arrested you. I've even seen people who feel like, America is so racist that cops are just repressive and abusive. I had someone who said, I heard someone, it was on Instagram, who their opinion was that American cops are so sexist and racist that they will hurt, rape, or kill someone whenever, especially minorities, whenever given the chance. So I was like, obviously, you do not have 5 points of an IQ in your whole stinking brain.
And that statistic is the idea that cops are just going to harass minorities or what you were talking about, do horrible things like rape them. If that were true, then we would be seeing an epidemic of that, and we don't see that.
Yeah, no, we don't. He did leave another response, so we'll go ahead and listen to that.
Yep. You're not getting my point. The reason I've been pulled over it's for bullshit reasons. They pull me over because I look suspicious, because I'm out on the wrong side of town. I don't know the reasons they pull me over, but they don't have a legit reason to give me a ticket because I fight back and asking for their badge number, asking for a reason they pull me over, and that's why the reason they back off, because they don't have a reason. Actually, though, I've been to jail once, and the time I got pulled over, he said I had a tail light out. I didn't have a tail light. The reason I went to jail is because I didn't have a license at the time. But okay, that's legit. And even though I went to jail, I never got convicted of anything. I got let out free because the judge knew that the cop was bullshitting me. My tail light was never out. To this day, I never fixed that tail light.
So,
okay, well, real quick here.
Yeah.
You want to go quick, Spencer?
Yeah. So, police officers generally will run your plates and see what sort of history you've had. And if someone has been to jail, that is something that will pop up. And so when a police officer pulls you over and you still, again, it sounds like you said you weren't speeding. We don't know that. If we assume that's true and you were in a different part of town that maybe has... so there could be all kinds of reasons. But when a police officer comes over and sees that you've been to jail, that is something that they do take into account when approaching your window.
Yeah, that's totally true. And also, let's say that you were saying cops are racist, right? And I've talked about this before when we were talking. I can't remember what episode it was in. We talked about it in the past. These cops are the same people that they watch some of the same entertainment and stuff like that. And when they see that Mexicans are drug dealers who are smuggling stuff across the border, and that's the only thing that they see in movies all the time, or they see that black people are gang members and crap like that, and they see that pushed in front of their face all the time, then what they do what are they going to do when they go to work and they're driving through the rough part of town? They're going to have that show or that entertainment in the back of their head because Hollywood and crap like that have pushed this idea in front of their head that maybe Mexicans are drug dealers or black people are gang members and crap like that. So you want to fight things, and you want to say that people are racist. What's racist is Hollywood. Okay, this is a powerful. It is a powerful image and a powerful, ideology, I guess, that they're pushing in front of everybody's faces when they constantly make movies or shows like this all the stinking time. So, these cops aren't racist. There are people who are racist, or there are people who maybe they don't even know any better, right? I mean, I'm not saying that Hollywood's racist, but maybe the people there simply just don't know any better, and so they don't realize the consequences for making shows like this and so crap like that. But when you drive, like Spencer said, yes, they'll see that you have criminal history, especially when you're driving through a rough part of town, and you have a criminal history. I would say, I can't make up any statistic, but I would say you're more likely to be pulled over. So yeah, as far as your taillight goes, I'm not even going to say anything to that. You have 2 more messages here. Try to get through real fast.
We'll play those and then kind of give thoughts on them, and then we can go.
Yep.
Listen, brother, I'm Muslim. I'm one of the most supposedly suspicious people on earth, and I have not been pulled over for no reason for once. Trust me or my family, anyone else. It's always been justified correctly.
Thank you. Yeah. People, when a cop pulls someone over, it's not like some random arbitrary reason. I mean, you think about it, right? How many times do you think a cop is driving by you and they're looking for someone, say, oh, that person's a Mexican, I got to pull them over, or oh, that person's black, I got to pull them over, or oh, that person is white, I got to pull them over. That's not what cops are doing. Absolutely no way. Okay. That's completely delusional to think that. Okay. It's not real at all. And I don't know if maybe you've created that opinion yourself, or other people have convinced you of that, or maybe you're not even aware that they have. So, leave that open as it may be. But no, cops are not racist. America certainly is not racist. America is the most unracist country in the whole world.
Especially systematically. There is no single law in all the laws that we have that you can point at and say that it is racist, especially against minorities.
If anything, minorities have more rights than the majority nowadays.
Yeah, and there is no legislation that is systematically racist. There may be racist people, but the American system is not racist.
Yep, absolutely. Take last messages from him. So we'll hear that, and no more messages, guys. We'll hear this, and we'll go ahead and give our thoughts and wrap it up for the day.
Yep.
Yeah, I might be confusing you guys. I only have one ticket for speeding, and I was legitimately speeding because I was racing in class. That's the one ticket I have under my name. Every time even the time I went to jail, I don't have a ticket to my name. I was never convicted. I never saw the judge because at the time I didn't have a license, so they thought I was undocumented or whatever. And I got pulled over for a legit reason, for an unlegit reason. The reason he told me I had a taillight out when I didn't, and they threw me in jail because they thought I was undocumented, and they got released because I wasn't undocumented. You get what I'm saying? The system is so fucked up.
Okay, so a couple problems with that. You said that your taillight was not broken, but earlier you said that you have never tried to fix that taillight. So it's one or the other. I'd stick with whichever one you said first. And in terms of driving without a ticket or without a license and going to jail, you are not supposed to drive without a license. Whether you're a legal citizen or an illegal citizen, you're still not supposed to drive without a license.
Yeah, absolutely no. Also, you've been pulled over 8 times, and that, like we just already, that already goes to refute your point. If America was racist and the system was racist, yes, there are problems with our justice system. That is absolutely true.
Yep.
But if America was racist systematically, like you said in your first comment, then you probably would have seen a judge, and you would have conceivably gone to jail for a much longer period of time, like back when America actually was racist, with things like segregation. But that is not what America is today, not even close. So, to say, like, everything you say actually just keeps working back against you. If you have one ticket that was, like you said, it was justified, and yeah, we've clarified it was justified. If you didn't have a license, then yeah, you're going to get pulled over. I don't know if they ever said to you because they thought you were an illegal immigrant, or if you just made that up in your head. But either way, if you didn't have a license, yeah, you were getting pulled over. So that's important to note. Also, like we said in the beginning, if you've been pulled over 8 times, ignoring your taillight incident so you can't bring it back up, because there are 6 other times there, there's 7 other times there. No, sorry, 6. Yeah, 6 other times there besides that one. And then, those are 6 times that cops had opportunities to for racist reasons, arrest you or put you in jail. So, or even worse than that, if cops were really racist, they could have just given you a big fat ticket every time, made you pay a lot of money in fines for speeding or whatever else they wanted, because you were, because America is racist. So everything you said about America being racist, you actually contradicted your own point.
Yep.
Okay.
End thoughts, and then we can go.
Yeah, I think I've already said my points pretty well. So, you have anything up to say, Spencer?
Just my general thoughts over this whole topic of police reform is that, yes, the police should be reformed in very small ways. We should not just be looking towards social workers or defunding the police. That is not the way to go. If you want to really improve police departments across America, you should do them individually. And the improvements you should make is de-escalating situations, giving them training for that, giving them, one of the people earlier mentioned, kind of psychological evaluation training. I think that would be a good idea. And I think in general, cops as a group are doing a pretty good job of trying to keep America safe and putting their lives on the line to keep America safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. You have our soldiers who they go out and they fight for us, and you have our cops at home who they do some, yeah, I'm obviously some the exact same, but they do also go out and fight for us every single day in our communities, and they're being hated every single day by individuals who don't know anything, saying that these cops are racist or that they hate us, and they don't. These cops, they work to protect us. These cops, I mean, it takes a high school education to work as a cop, and you can do better things and earn more money than being a officer. So, if you wanted to have a better job, they could have a better job if they wanted to. They choose to be a cop. They choose to work for us, to sacrifice for us, and to do what they do every single day. So I have the utmost respect for our police, and I completely support them and love them for everything they do for us. So, yeah, thank you for our police.
Amen.
Yep. My name is Coleson.
My name is Spencer. We're 18 and American.
And we are signing off. I'm sorry we just missed your message, El Comandante. Come on the show next time. We will take that message. We'll have a whole other conversation. Keep a lookout. We'll schedule a new show. Thank you guys for coming on today, and
We'll
have a great day. Have a great day tomorrow. Awesome.
All right. See you guys.
See you later. Thank you for coming on.